Thanks for tuning in to episode 200 of the Coffee Roaster Warm-Up Sessions podcast. In this episode, Sergi sits down with Maxwell Mooney to talk about how you can turn your coffee business around. Now, 2025 has come with a lot of a series of unfortunate events and unpredictability, which has made running a coffee business challenging and, well, unpredictable. Maxwell Mooney shares 3 practical steps and tips on that you can implement this week, this month, to turn your coffee business around, make it more profitable, and give it the extra life that it needs to keep going. Well, let's get into this.
Yes, things look quite different. One on camera, probably if you're watching, but also like, why am I doing the intro? Like, I definitely shouldn't be the one doing the intro because Mark kills it, and Mark is the front runner of the Mirror Coffee Roaster podcast. I'm usually like the co-host, and we do it together. So it's always weird when I'm by myself recording the intro. And also it's always also weird when I'm doing all the technical stuff because, folks, let me be very transparent and open and honest with you. This is take 2 after Maxwell Mooney, who's on the podcast with me today, unloaded some incredible value and some good stuff for us to talk about. And it didn't record because I didn't press the record button on Riverside, but did it on my camera. So folks, you live and you learn, and that's why it's probably not my level of expertise, but Mark's. With all of that said, you guys, I'm super stoked to bring back a guest that means a lot to me. And Max, I'm going to have to hype you up again and again and again. And that's freaking Maxwell Mooney, the GO. For those of you who have been in coffee, you know already the impact that Maxwell has had on the industry as a whole, but also on me. Like, you've heard me bring up his name multiple times. You've heard me talk about narrative. And Max has not only impacted me as a coffee professional, as a business owner, but also as a human. Some of the most challenging times in my life, Maxwell walked through with me and just impacted me on that personal level in a way that makes me want to not even simply be a better businessman to make more money. Like, we're not in this industry for the money, but simply to be able to love and serve and just honor people in the best way I can possibly do it as a human being, like at home, but also as a coffee professional. Behind the bar, whether it's like roasting coffee, whether it's serving drinks, whether it's talking to guests and clients. He's just really inspired me just to love people really, really well and serve them really, really well. So Maxwell, thank you again for coming back on the episode, on the podcast in this episode 200. So I'm super stoked to talk to you. It's 4th of July and you're making time to do this on a holiday, dude. That is who you are. I love it. Yeah,
man. I mean, I'm super honored, and like in the same way, you've had a huge impact on me, man. And it's just been a pleasure to get to know you and to serve alongside you and to bump elbows with you as we work to serve communities well and make excellent coffee a little bit better, and just hopefully make the world a slightly better place, you know, with us being in it. So it's an honor to be on the journey with you. And thanks for having me back on the pod.
For sure.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for listening to me yap again. And it's crazy. This is episode 200. Good for you guys.
Yeah.
That's an incredible amount of consistency.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work, but it's also been super fun meeting and talking with people, bringing guests back because we just value what they bring, and then also like be able to process things, like for Mark and I to process things in front of people, you know, and get feedback. It's been a fun journey, and that's, I think a lot of it, that's why we all love coffee and we all love being in the industry is connecting with people and just coming up with great new ideas and how to serve and love people well, and then make tasty stuff. We all love tasty coffee. Speaking of tasty coffee, we talked about the fact that you're not drinking batch. I am still drinking batch, still on the fellow Aiden, even though it's not in the office. Doing the thing, you know, got to stay consistent. Right. But what are you drinking?
I am drinking a Guji Cebu from Ethiopia, roasted by Elm Coffee Roasters. It's a washed Ethiopian, and it's delicious. It does everything that I want a good washed Ethiopian to do. It's got that like floral quality, stone fruit, black tea. It's delicious.
Yeah.
Big fan.
And it's not batch. You said it was espresso, right?
Yeah, it's espresso. I made this one on my DF83
Sick.
and my Laylit Bianca.
Nice. Heck yeah.
yeah.
That's super sick. Yeah. That's awesome because that coffee has been on my radar. I jumped into a narrative, I think last week, and saw Nate, and we caught up and we were talking about this coffee and a lot of the coffees that Nate was actually roasting. So I'm super stoked on it. So
It'd probably be better if he wasn't roasting it, but it's still okay even with him touching it.
He's definitely gonna hear that, and we're gonna have a conversation. I bet, Nate.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. He'll roast me from here to oblivion, and all shall be well.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun talking about roasting, and Nate has obviously been one of my sounding boards for Mirror as a roaster, and all of the narrative team. With that said, I'm drinking the Juan Pena. Yeah, it's the Típica Mejorado Natural. Mark made a nice little connection with our friends up north in Canada, and we literally just snagged, I think, roughly 20 pounds. So I don't think this coffee is available anymore on the website. We might have like 3 pounds of green left. I don't know what we're going to do with it. Maybe give it a whirl in the big old IR12 and see what happens.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I think majority of the coffee went actually to narrative. So I'm super proud of that. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're a narrative local, go get it. Mm-hmm. If it's not already gone. Might already be gone.
Great coffee.
If I saw a coffee from Juan Pena roasted by Mirror on a shelf, I would have to buy it immediately. So
that was one of the things. Is like I was talking to Kenji, and he was gonna be on bar when Mirror's about to serve, and he's like, "Yeah, should I just like kick it off with Juan Pena?" And I was like, "Dude, is that even a question?" Like, of course,
obviously,
yeah. So it's super sick. So I'm super stoked on it.
Yeah, so cool.
With all of that said, Max, because you're returning guest and because some of the folks already know somewhat about you, even if it's a little bit, would you just catch us up from the last episode to this episode? What are you up to in life? What are you doing these days?
It's a great question. A lot has happened since the last episode. The last time I was on, I still owned Narrative Coffee, and I do not any longer. My family and I, we relocated to the East Coast from the greater Seattle area. And with that, we decided that it was the best move for us to pass Narrative off to a different set of hands. So we sold Narrative to Alex, which your listeners, if they're very diligent, already know because you have interviewed Alex since that has happened. But yeah, and then in that time, I basically started just doing consulting and helping other coffee business owners or aspiring coffee business owners carry out their visions and make their communities better places and help their businesses thrive. At Threadbare Coffee Consulting, we have kind of our mission is to help people create healthy coffee businesses that take great care of everyone. And we think that we can make the biggest impact on the world through helping cafe owners thrive, because it's only when they're thriving that they can create a company that allows other people to thrive. Yeah. And so we focus on doing that, and we feel like there's a really big need in the market for that, and there's not a lot of resources, so we do our best to try to fill that need and help people out in the process.
Yeah. I mean, here's a question for you, just like right off the bat that I was thinking. You're consulting, helping train and lead people. Kind of a lot of the times people see consultants as folks who are kind of in the background. How much time do you spend up front or in cafes? How much time are you going in and, meeting people there?
Yeah, not that much. Actually, it is very much a in the background kind of gig. We do offer site visits, and those are my favorite, where I get to go and spend time at our clients' operations and work with their staff and see what they're up to and taste their coffees and offer feedback and just help them tighten things up. And so, every time we get to do those, it's always a real great joy for me, because I do. Me, and so you know how deeply motivated by hospitality I am. And so this job has been a little bit disconnected in a direct sense from hospitality. It's very directed in like the system side of things, but I don't get to have that same guest experience on the ground as much, which is easily the thing that I miss the most. And it's the thing that like I miss a lot from my daily life. So but yeah, it's been good, but it is definitely a sort of behind the scenes kind of role.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally feel that. Haven't been behind the bar since February, and sometimes when I pop into Narrative Everett, I'll be like talking to everyone, and they'll be like, "Oh, Serge, you wanna? It's kind of slow. You wanna hop behind the bar and like
Hop
pour a
on.
couple of drinks?" And I was like, "Dude, are you serious? Heck yeah!"
Yes.
So I love that. And then I'll go to Iron Rooster, and the owner Fred is like a older gentleman who is just like. I don't know why people think he's grumpy. I think he's the nicest person ever. The last few times I pop in, he's like, "Hey, did you bring your pitcher? Like, we have a line out the door, my guy." And I was like, "I know." He's like, "Can you hop in?" I was like, "Dude, for sure." Like, can I do that? That's so sick. So
That's so
I feel
fun.
that like there's always this little like, man, I just want to get into that contact of like, coffee cup person, that relationship that you build behind the bar, but also in like just guest service in general. And even when you were up in Bellingham and like Everett, we used to talk about this idea of like, you're like, I just want to see people succeed in coffee.
Yeah.
And that's literally has been your like motivation and heart towards Mirror. You've just been like, dude, what do you guys need? Like, how can I help you guys succeed? And you're just motivated by that kind of desire to see people just crush it in general, like on every single level. So, and that to me is like, that to me is everything. Like, we need more people like you in the industry. With that said, one of the things, like the reason I wanted to bring you back on the podcast is one, I want to deliver as much like practicality and value to listeners, especially to cafe owners, to managers, folks who have been in the industry maybe for a while, but also folks who are newer in the industry who are just starting cafes in a year like 2025. And we just finished, the second quarter of 2025. So we're halfway through the year. There's definitely been some challenges this year, and they have been definitely stacked up. We talked to Edwin Martinez about what those challenges look like from like a producing level and from like origin. But what are some challenges you've noticed that cafes and cafe owners and managers have faced in the first half of 2025?
I think there's sort of like three major elements that I see that I think would help cafe owners really just weather the challenges that they're facing. And if I had to boil them down, I would say first, lock in on vision and values, first and foremost. Number two is logic first and emotion second. And number three would be to deliver value, value, value. And really focus in on those three sort of like key areas. The challenges that cafe owners have faced, and frankly, it's been the whole industry, we kind of share a lot of them, right? We have greater economic uncertainty and times of feeling unsure about things usually lead to downturns in spending, right? Consumer confidence has like always been a major metric in terms of the overall health of the economy. The coffee in particular has faced wild swings this year from environment related things primarily, but also speculators sort of like hopping in and messing with markets and things like that. But it's like we went from the economic outlook of Brazil's harvest being absolutely catastrophic of like, oh my God, this is going to be the worst year we've ever had for a harvest, and demand is higher than it's been. So prices are reaching like price levels we haven't seen in many years, to now it's like free falling because it looks like the harvest is going to be bigger than we've had in years. And so it's just like those sort of waves can be challenging to navigate as an operator. And not only that, is that happening on the coffee side of things, which is obviously the largest expense in terms of cost of goods sold for all of our coffee businesses, but it's happening with all the other ingredients and all the other things as well, somewhat due to the overall global economy being sort of still feeling the effects of COVID, and every single economy has faced inflationary pressures. Some have faced more than others. We fared fairly well here in the U.S., but it still negatively impacts us. And then our trade policies have been changing and have been sort of developing in the moment. Nobody really knows what's going on, and that instability makes it very challenging to make good decisions. And so the sort of like impacts to that for cafe owners are really challenging to navigate, but especially if you haven't been paying very close attention. And that lack of intention around doing kind of the hard but not sexy work in the coffee space is putting the pressure on a lot of people in ways that they hadn't really experienced before, where it's just like you've been able to kind of fake it till you make it a little bit, but right now the pressure is just exposing cracks in a lot of businesses' foundations that either some are rising to the occasion and working to patch them up and correct them, and others are like, I don't want to do this, I'm too tired, like I'm just gonna let someone else handle the problem. So that's sort of like the challenges that we're facing.
And most of these challenges you're describing, they're not fairly new challenges. No, they're not. They're just increased, and the pressure behind those challenges is kind of like been boiling. And like 2025 is just in general a challenging year outside of just coffee and life for most people. And, you know, everything going on in the world, it's like impacting those practical day-to-day choices that we make when we're looking at numbers, when we're reading P&Ls, if we're even, you know, brave enough to read our P&Ls. Sometimes that's the scary part, you know what I mean? Or unpacking and trying to understand, like, hey, how do I manage labor? Because usually, like you've mentioned, like labor is one of the, you know, one of the biggest challenges for cafe owners and managers to make their to be able to manage so that their business can be sustainable and successful for the long term. So with all of that said, let's just like really jump into it. Can you basically break down a few things that would help cafe owners and managers today? Like if they said, okay, it's 4th of July, I'm going to listen. I just, you know, had a holiday weekend. We're going in first day of the week. Like Max said, these things I should implement to help with these challenges. Can you fire a few of those off?
Absolutely. So my first recommendation is to lock in on your vision and values. And what I mean by that is you can think of your business kind of like an airplane, in that it has many different parts and your business kind of maps to those parts. You have a cockpit, which is your leadership. You have your wings, which are your product and your sales. You have your fuel that moves you, and that's your gas. And then you have your staff, which like live in the body of the airplane. And a lot of folks who haven't taken the time to really understand their vision or their values or their mission, they're kind of flying without a flight plan. They don't know exactly where they're going, and they're not paying super close attention to what's out in front of them. And they're just sort of like continuing on with the day-to-day things. And that is having a very significant impact on people, because they will start making decisions that send mixed messages to their guests and their consumers. And you'll hear a lot of coffee companies talk about quality, or talk about sustainability, or talk about like equitability. And when the rubber is starting to meet the road, when things get tight, people will then start shifting on those things because they feel like they need to meet the market where it's at in the moment and all of those. And so they end up accidentally selling their value short. And there's an old saying that values aren't values until they cost you something. And having real clarity on what your values are, and an honest, forthright look at whether or not they are immovable for you, right? Like a value is one of those things, to my mind, that you should be willing to bet your business on. It should be that serious for you if it's going to make it into a values thing, you know, of like, am I willing to lose my company over doing things this way, or is that something I'm willing to make a concession on, you know? And so just having real clarity on that and driving in toward that is a really important thing. I would say don't sell your soul to stay afloat, you know. And I've seen coffee companies lose what's made them very special by sort of trading in their values. And so to me, that's a really important one, is spend time. If you don't have them yet, if you don't have a vision or a mission or value statements, they should just be more than statements that you just do once and as a business exercise, and then never talk about them again or do anything with them again. They need to be guiding principles and things that you talk about every day. Like you shouldn't ever go a day without thinking about them. They should be that sort of like integral in your business, and everyone should know them. And it should be exhausting to hear people continue talking about it. You're like, I've heard it a million times. It's like, yeah, well, you need to hear it 1,000,001, right? Because they're sometimes easy to forget or to just sort of let fall by the wayside. But when you let them fall by the wayside, you lose what makes you a lot of times.
Yeah.
And you send
I
these messages.
totally agree with that. There's a few things that come to my mind when I hear you say that. And one, when I joined Narrative and when you were training me and just teaching me about, how Narrative does things, the foundational values just stuck so deeply with me. And I knew that the way, like, for example, hospitality is paramount, quality is served humbly, like making room at the table for everyone. And the last one is community. Great. Yeah. Create community. Yeah. So like those values were basically not only beneficial for me to know what Narrative believes in, those values were beneficial for me to understand how do I execute day to day. So it was easy for me to create a staff meeting and be like, hey, today we're going to talk about how is hospitality paramount this last few weeks. Like, give me an example of what that meant to you this week. So it created structure, it created vision, and it also created like this dynamic where it built culture. So I think you're 100% right on. I also remember back in the day before working in coffee, when I was in the kind of nonprofit ministry world, I remember writing a curriculum for a course and using that training course. And I was like, you know what? There's something about the fact that the foundational values of this nonprofit are actually like, they are the reason why we do this. So I literally would create a course around the 15 foundational values of the nonprofit. And it was, I don't know why, it was considered slightly controversial because it kind of deviated from the classic discipleship idea of what that means. And I was like, oh, these foundational values actually will lead people to execute on our mission, but also they will help us just become better. Hopefully they're good enough foundational values or good foundational values that help us just be better humans in general. So yeah, that's like, what else? Another thing, like, so that was one. What's the second thing that you would say cafe owners can execute on this week?
Yeah. This one is intentionally worded the way that it is because I mean it this way: logic first, emotion second. And what I mean by that is not logic only and emotion never. Logic first, emotion second. It is very common for us to meet cafe owners or coffee business owners in general, it's roasters too, who they're struggling, right? And when we meet people, sometimes when we start working with someone, they're like 3 weeks away from closing sometimes. And so it's really common to meet people in a moment where they're not feeling great about things. And almost always one of the things they lead with is, I didn't get in this industry for the money. And it's like, dude, we know. Like, you don't have to tell me. And I know why, because the pressure out there in the sort of like cultural milieu is that coffee business owners are raking in all the money, and it's like the baristas that are being taken advantage of, and like, or producers or pickers or pressed and all those sorts of things. And like, I'm not trying to diminish the economic realities of any other part of the supply chain. However, I do think that a lot of people are really willing to diminish the economic realities of this part of the supply chain for cafe owners. And it is a very challenging thing to run well. And it's maybe one of the least intuitive. And so it's challenging, right? And we run into folks who are having a hard time with it. And one of the most common challenges we run into with people who are right on the edge of having to close is they tend to be making decisions with emotions first, and then kind of caring about numbers second, or maybe not even at all. And so it puts them in a place where, like right now, where the economic pressures they've turned the temperature up, and it's made it harder to fake it till you make it, because there's no fudge factor. There's no margin of error on people's margins anymore. And so it's like, if you haven't been paying attention to your costs, all of them rose at such a level that you didn't realize anything was wrong until it was too late. If you haven't been paying attention to like your labor costs, that's usually going up as well. And a lot of folks are running labor really unhealthily in the first place, because they assume that spending more money on labor means you're taking better care of people. And then if you care about people, then you should be willing to spend more money on labor to make that happen. And that can be a fair thing if it's done right, but generally speaking, it's not. It just means being overstaffed when it's not necessary, and like scheduling based on the feeling of how busy a time period is, rather than how much money is passing through the business at that given time that justifies where how many people should be on at a time. And so, to my mind, when you make good logical decisions first and then support that with an emotional kind of reality that mediates the logic, that's a much more helpful and healthy way of scheduling people and building a schedule and taking care of your staff and your team. Because what happens a lot of times is that sometimes people can accidentally subsidize their poor pricing structures or their poor efficiency practices by adding more people to the mix, instead of noticing when the systems are broken and dealing with the system first. Instead of doing that, they just throw more bodies at it. And so they're trying to put out fires with bodies. And by not doing that, by focusing in with the logic first and saying like, we have to make $150 per hour work for one person, they say, well, we need to add another person to this $150 hour, instead of like, well, what are we doing to make this $150 work for one person, right? And so it gets you out of whack, and it oftentimes ends up encouraging you to make poor decisions long term, that then you're like, how are we losing money every week? Like, things are going crazy and haywire, and it's like, okay, but how many jobs are you protecting when you have to close your business, right? Like, that's a horrible place to be. And sometimes it happens even when you're doing everything right, right? Like, that's a reality. I've certainly experienced that. But there are a lot of times where that is within your sphere of control, and it's not controlled. And so I think if owners really want to lock in, it would serve them well to rearrange their decision making to be logic first and emotion second.
What do you think? Like, I'm listening to you say that, and I'm thinking, I've also like helped a few other folks, open a cafe, and one of the challenges is communicating that to folks that don't have the experience in the industry. Because one of the things is like, if you're not going to throw bodies just on the, bodies on the floor, oops. If you're not going to do that, and if you're actually going to make your, bar flow more efficient, or so that each person can execute at a higher level, to be actually more sustainable and profitable, like that's like a bar flow thing, right? That's like part of it, not all of it. That's like part of it is like a bar flow thing. And if you already made a mistake of like maybe making some poor choices in bar flow, what are some other practical steps that you can like correct at this point? Because maybe you're listening to this podcast and the person's like, okay, I get it, logic, but now I feel like I'm so deep in the hole. Like, where do I start? What do I do?
What does that mean? Yeah, totally. So one of the other challenges that business owners face in terms of distractions is oftentimes when money gets slow or you're starting to feel like it's tight, the temptation is to add, and just add things. Often it's better to subtract and take away things that aren't moving the needle forward for you first. And that will usually buy you some margin in a way that a lot of other things can't. And there's some really common areas where I see this, and a couple of trends that I would say are probably likely candidates. If you're out there listening, this is something to really consider and factor into your decision making. But there have been two major drink trends that have become incredibly popular that a lot of people are not pricing correctly because of the amount of labor that it takes to fulfill them. But that's cold foam and matcha. Both of those items take a significant amount of time to produce well, either making the cold foam in the moment, or like whisking up matcha by hand. And I'm not saying don't serve them, but what I am saying is if you're going to serve them, you need to make sure that you are getting enough margin on those items to actually produce the sort of results that you're looking for. Because the reality is, one of the classic examples that I look for and encourage people to check out is to think about McDonald's, right? The people don't think about this, but McDonald's only serves French fries, and it's not because they couldn't do onion rings or they couldn't do, some other like mozzarella sticks and other things. They serve French fries because they make great money on their French fries, and anything else that they could sell would actually make them less margin. And so they would actually be hurting themselves by selling onion rings because they make less margin on onion rings. And so all they're doing is diverting people who would otherwise order French fries and encouraging them to order onion rings where they make less money off of it. And so they only sell French fries as a side dish because they make great money on it and it's a great product. And they found this one item that they are able to get great margins on. And when times get tough, you have to really focus in and figure out, hey, where are we actually making money? Like, what's the economic driver of this business? And figure out, like, hey, what are we making money on, and what are the things that we aren't? And look at the things that aren't making you money and cut them, get rid of them, right? Maybe that looks like not serving cold foam anymore. Which, if you know, Maru, the company that basically kicked off the trend of cold foam, is no longer selling cold foam on their drinks. They will on one, like a drink that has it built in, but they won't make it for any other drinks. And there's reasons why. One of them is because the baristas get tired of doing it because it takes a lot of work, but also because it's slowing everything else down. And so they're not able to sell as many of the drinks that do make them money. And so that's an area where people should really take a look at and try to figure things out and make some of those logic decisions that are supported by your emotion rather than just sort of what feels right or what's trendy or whatever.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of other sort of areas to look at.
Yeah. What I've heard recently, I listened to a podcast recently about Luckin coming into the United States. Yeah. And they folks are saying, like, Luckin is a major competitor to Starbucks and comparing the two. And one of the things that Luckin does is they basically minimize the menu. Yeah. They do a few modifications. That's it. You don't have a million choices to modify this drink and make it this or that, because that really affects output. Yep. So therefore they're like, okay, you can do these modifications. It's not like throw everything out. Yep. It's like you can do these and we can execute very fast and quickly and efficiently. And according to our standard, we can execute on that. And we're going to just roll with that instead of saying like, do a million things. So like, and I think one of the, again, this is a very important point, but I don't want to like overemphasize too much on this point. But the reality is, like, I think when it comes to like logic versus emotion, it's easy to get emotional when you're working behind the bar as a manager or as an owner, and you hear the same person come in multiple times and say, "Oh, are you serving matcha yet?" Yeah. And you're like, shoot, man, if I can just grab these 5 people and make them buy matcha, I'll make a little more money. But the reality is, it's like, hey, will you open your cafe till like 4 or 5 p.m.? And then, 2 to 5 p.m., the cafe is dead, and you're like, shoot. Like, did I make? So it's a lot of those things. I think it's good to consider. It's good to just kind of think through. And Mark and I always say, like, to get a customer and guest and like input is absolutely crucial. If you're not getting that input, then you're also sleeping on opportunities that are possibly out there. So there's a balance, but you approach that opinion or that input with logic first, and then follow up with emotion. So sick. What else, Max?
Yeah. So I think the last thing that can really serve people well in this time is to really drill in on delivering value. Just focus on delivering value to people. There's maybe 2 ways to illustrate this. One, there's not a great definition, like a working definition of what value is. I think we all have an idea of it, but none of us really have like thoroughly thought about what value is. And I think maybe the best way to describe it, and I've been sort of formulating this because I want to get it out into the world because I think it could be helpful, but it's still not polished yet, so forgive me. But I think what I've noticed value is the effort, time, and money that it takes to do a specific task as a generalist, right? So like me as a human, I am capable of doing things like drywall and plumbing work and things like that. I'm not great at it, right? I can DIY it, but I'm not great at it. And sometimes I don't know how to do anything at all, right? Like I could figure out eventually with enough time how to solder a motherboard on a computer and fix a computer, right? That's a lot of time, effort, energy invested into that task, right? And so where value is the ability for someone who specializes in that thing to do that same task efficiently, whatever that delta is between how much time, energy, and effort it took me to figure something out and however much it costs them as a specialized thing to do that, that's where value is, right? Because they can make an amount of money off of doing that same task for me and filling a need in my life. And whatever that gap is, the bigger the gap is, the more money they could potentially make. Right. And somewhere in there, there's a sweet spot, right? Of like, they're making money and it's also easier for me. Somebody posted on Threads the other day, they posted that every 95-gallon batch of beer that a brewer makes that costs them $2,300, they're making $5,800 in profit off of it. And the sort of subtext of that was that they're fleecing us for like making money off of this beer. And I tried to help illustrate this reality by being like, I hope so, right? Like at the end of the day, I don't want to make a 95-gallon batch of beer. And it would take me a ton of time to brew any beer at all, even 20 gallons of beer. And I'm happy to give someone $10 for a beer that's already made and delicious that I can just crack open, because it's way easier for me to get $10 than it is for me to get everything that I need to make beer.
Right.
And there's a value differential there. There's a delta between the amount of time, effort, and energy it would take me to learn how to make beer properly and me being able to get a really great beer for $10, right? Like in there is where that value is. And so if people focus in on delivering value for guests, and to me, there's sort of two apexes of value. There's the best bang for your buck, and then there's just the best experience overall, right? And those to me are like the two best versions of value of like, oh man, this is really good for the money, and this is just really good. But I think if you can drill in and focus on delivering that, regardless of whatever economic realities and season that you're in, you're going to succeed because you're filling a need, you're fixing a problem. And so if you're feeling a little bit lost, one of the first things that I recommend anyone, whether you're trying to figure out strategy for a business or just your life in general, if you feel like you can't get inspired, you can't figure out what to do with yourself, you feel aimless and lost, the first thing I recommend to people is to just go look around, find a need, and start filling it. Period. Just look around, and whatever need you can see out there that aligns with your interests, like maybe you care about animals a lot and you're feeling aimless and you love animals because they are nicer to you than people are, and your local animal shelter needs volunteers, go freaking volunteer. Go find something to fill a need. And by doing that, it'll help you see where there's opportunities to make the world a little bit better, and it will start to crystallize purpose for you. And the same is true for business, right? If you need to figure out what to do, like look around and say, what's a big problem in the world that I want to fix, right? And sometimes the easiest way to figure that out is just what pisses you off, right? Like when you look at the world, just like what boils your blood when you see it, and it's like, go get to work on that thing, like go fix that problem. And I think that by doing that, you end up getting more of that potential for value because you're actually solving a problem, and you just have to figure out how to like make it work, right? And so when you're even too, like when you have a responsibility of running a business, you have the responsibility of paying people money, right? And that delta, that space between what it would take a generalist to do something and what it would take a specialist to do things, like the bigger that is, the more potential there is there. So it's like if you're trying to figure out from a business standpoint, like where do I put my efforts and energy, just look around and try to figure out like what's a big problem, how can I fix it, and which one has the most opportunity to make a little bit more money, and go do it. The reality is the bigger the delta, the harder the problem usually. And so you're gonna have to solve some big problems if you want to, create a long-term winning business. But start there. So just focus in on delivering value, and it will carry you through some of the hard times.
Yeah. I'm glad you unpacked that the way you did, because one, Mark and I talk about this idea of value quite a bit, a lot. And the way you just defined that, the way you made it very practical and identified like the points. I hope this hits home with people. And like, this is like you talking about all of this just gives me like goosebumps and shivers. Why? Because it resonates deeply with me and with who I am. Like that has, you just kind of quote unquote, like just read my mind and everything. Like I can't verb it as good as you. And I'm like stuttering right now because a lot of the things that I've done in my life that were super impactful, whether it's in coffee, whether it's like outside of other industries, have been because I found that thing that I'm like, oh, I want to impact the world or solve a problem in the world through these means. Like whether it's, I don't know, some things even as like, you know, shooting a wedding, you know, stuff like simple things, nothing like complicated, nothing like, you know, owning a business and employing like hundreds of people, but like even the every day-to-day, every like niche day-to-day thing, like when it exudes that, when you're motivated by bringing value to the world, by solving problems and by serving the world in a deep and meaningful way, it changes everything. And I feel like everything else, then you're going to be aligned with your mission, vision, values. Your foundational values are going to be your bread and butter because they're like coming out as the real true thing to you. And then you are going to end up choosing logic over emotion. So I think all of those things like really go well hand in hand, go together. So folks, again, like if you're listening to this and you're trying to decide, okay, what are some practical things you can do? One of the things that Max mentioned in the beginning is simply like, have you went back to your mission vision system that you, or not a system, but your mission vision that you created in the beginning? Have you reevaluated that? Have you looked at it? How are you executing on that? Do you need to like schedule a meeting this week with your team and go through that again? If you have, great. If you haven't, you should this week. That's like a very practical way you can get started. And second, if you're looking at all of this and you're thinking like, oh man, I'm struggling with making a decision and I'm feeling all these feelings and I'm trying to decide, go back to logic. Like try to execute on logic. What are some things that actually will make you a better and more sustainable business when it comes to the practicality? Look at your P&L. You know, do some numbers and then execute on those and then implement emotion. Don't, you know, one of the things is like people want to go one way or another. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like you want to have emotion and passion and like all of that in your cafe. And then finally, think value, execute on value, and use that definition that Max laid out right there. And how are you doing that this week, today, and the month to come? Because I am really hopeful for 2025. I think there are some possibilities. Yes, it's been challenging first half, but as I look forward to 2025, I see just a trend of like, okay, coffee isn't slowing down, especially the specialty sector of the industry is not. Like it's growing and it's going to continue to grow, and we just have to make smarter choices and we just have to continue rolling. So Max, again, thank you. You honestly, I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but you brought so much value to me, I believe to the listeners of this episode, and just in general to the industry. Do you have any way that folks can stay connected with you that is easy for you, one, and also engaging for folks? And what are some ways people can follow up if they have more questions?
Yeah. If it's consulting related, follow me at Maxwell Threadbare on Instagram and also on Threads. And you can also send me an email if you have any consulting related questions, just maxwell@threadbarecoffee.com.
Sick.
If you just want to stay up on my personal world, my tags are Maxwell A. Mooney. There you'll mostly find music, barbecue, coffee,
The good stuff.
just whatever, you know,
Yeah.
stuff that I like, but don't really post about from a professional standpoint. And yeah, you can also follow me on Threads there. Warning, you might run into more controversial opinions on that particular platform, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. But you always engage with good dialogue and conversation. So I appreciate that.
Always.
Yeah. Well,
I
thanks
try.
again, Max. We are so excited to see what happens in the near future with everything that we're doing. And I'm so excited to stay in touch with you and continue these conversations, maybe who knows, on another episode at some
Sounds
point.
great. I'll be here for
keep
episode
updating.
300 or 400 or where we need.
Exactly. Sick, dude. All right. And like we always say, folks, reflect what's good.